I am the man who always turns up at the climax of a film and the whole front row has to rise. They have to stand up for a long time, too, because I'm not thin. After a struggle or two, or three, or four, I find a seat. But before I make use of it, there are many things to be done. First, I must find my pipe, my tobacco, and my mattress. Then off with my overcoat, and another struggle as I fold it and place it under my seat. Oh dear, now where are my sandwiches? I must have left them in my coat pocket. I am the man who crackles sandwich paper, who squirts orange juice in my neighbor's eye, who laughs in the wrong places, and who knocks out his pipe on the knee of the woman next to him. As for the celluloid, I am a cinema addict. I don't profess to understand films. In fact, most of them I find quite impossible to follow. I never understand what it's all about, and I've given up trying. I also tend to mix the various characters in each film, and my wife tells me that I always boo the hero and cheer the villain. Did you ever see a film called The Old Dark House? Now, that was a film which appealed to me. It was terrible. Every conceivable horror that ever was took part in that film. It concerns 5 people who find themselves stranded one stormy, bleak night in an old dark house in the wild mountains of Wales. The occupants of this house are the most abominable collection of horror pieces I have ever come across. Morgan, the butler of this frightful story, played by my favorite actor Boris Karloff, defies description. Unfortunately, he's not much use in this program, being both deaf and dumb. However, he frees the horrible madman Saul, who is permanently locked up in an attic. They nearly finished me off, too. I just got away in time. And now I must eat my last tomato sandwich. It's a bit difficult to find in the dark. I think it's got a bit squashed somewhere. Whoops! I'm so sorry, madam. I was a very musical child. I sang like a nightingale immediately after I was born. Indeed, when only a few hours old, my papa held me closely to the gramophone and played me a military band version of the Ride of the Valkyries. Whether or not this had any direct bearing upon my musical life later on, I'm not in a position to say, but it appears that I was much pleased and distinctly said, "Ha ha!" I have always been absolutely fascinated by musical instruments, and wherever noise was organized, I was there. I like particularly the big outside instruments like the double bass, the bass drum, and the delightful tuba. They attracted me not only orally, but also visually. I screamed with delight and clapped my hands when the bass trombonist put the great mouthpiece over his lips and pushed out his slide, gleaming in the sunlight as far as it would go, though I fear never far enough for me. I could never get close enough to the music makers and must have spent 3/4 of my childhood in an entanglement of bassoons, trombones, and horns. I would willingly have slept in the great bell-like openings of the sousaphone or the bass tuba, but my parents wouldn't have it. On my 5th birthday, I was given a violin. My mother was very eager that I should take up this instrument. She herself was an excellent pianist and hoped that in time we would be able to make music together. But alas and alack, her wish was never fulfilled. I loathed and hated the violin, dear, oh dear, oh dear. The feeble, whining scratches which I managed to produce irritated and infuriated me beyond words. I wanted to blow or bang, but not scrape. In my mind, I saw shining trumpets or clarinets covered with a multitude of glittering keys and held comfortably in the mouth, whilst I stood in front of my music stand with a dreaded piece of wood wedged between my chin and left shoulder, getting my fingers all caught up in its wretched strings, the silly bow poking about all over the place. What torture! What derision! I struggled with the violin for over 8 years. Yes, it was said even that I showed great promise on the instrument. Well, of course, you know, occasionally I found pleasure in playing with my mother, who was a most stimulating lady. Every Thursday night, my mother had an evening of chamber music in the house. I was never actually allowed up for this, but sometimes I would sneak down the stairs and look through the keyhole. There they all were, fiddles, cellos, a lot of scrapers, but not a trombone amongst them. There was no doubt about it, I just simply had to play something. I saved up my pocket money and managed to buy an old horn and a set of ex-army drums, followed later by a bass saxophone, an enormous affair with a lot of plants engraved all over. I taught myself to play these instruments and became something of a one-man band, since I was never really content to play one instrument at a time. The violin I neglected sadly, which made my poor mother very unhappy. She felt both physically and mentally unable to accompany me on the drums. Nevertheless, she managed to arouse my interest in a very different way. My mother, you know, was not only a first-class pianist, but something of a singer and an actress as well. One day, she played to me the entire piano version of Wagner's Die Meistersinger, singing all the parts herself. Now, whereas I was a one-man band, she was a one-woman opera. The bass part of Hans Sachs she sang 2 octaves higher. A few days later, she took me to see the opera at the Royal Opera House. This was indeed the most memorable musical experience of my childhood. We went home with the music still ringing in my head. What splendid music.